Happy spooky season, Team Doom. And a quick little disclaimer before we start the show. So this episode that you're about to hear, I recorded this like maybe a couple of days before the new Candyman movie came out. So everything that you're about to hear right now maybe sound a little bit outdated in the beginning. But the main thing is that you pay attention to like the main topic about the conversation about Ted Bundy and dealing with other serial killers that could be talked about in the realm of like true crime movies and what have you. So with that being said, enjoy the show and stay diabolical, people.
Welcome to hell. There is no escape. There is no escape. You are in my control now. Welcome to hell.
Yo! Welcome, Team Doom! We are back! We are back! Oh yeah! It's your boy, Walterdoom, and we are back for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror, the horror podcast where I talk about any and everything related to the genre. Yes! And this has been a long hiatus, y'all. Man, I can't believe like I've been gone for like this long. You know, I hope y'all are still rocking with me. You know, a lot of things have changed, a lot of things have been different, but you know, let's just rock out right now. Let's rock out to this beat right now. Let's rock fucking out, because we are lit right now. I am turned the fuck up. Okay, I make it sound like I was drinking, but nah. But nah, man, we about to get in this motherfucking thing, y'all. We are about to get into this thing. I haven't been in this genre for a while. You know, it's like, oh my god. You know, let's just hear the beat for a minute. Let's hear it for the beat. Let's hear the beat. Oh man. I swear, y'all. Like, yo, just hearing that Cali the Beat song once again in this intro just really just hypes me up, you know, because I'm just like, yo, I've been at it for like, shit, how long have I been at this, Producer Doom? I feel like it's been like since, I want to say 2019 I've been at this podcast, or maybe like late 2018 with this podcast. And yo, I mean, yeah, it's only like 69 episodes. Hey, we made to episode 69. Hey, no, let's stop. 69 in the house. All right, but yeah, you know, like, we're on our 69th episode, and this is just something I love to do, y'all. You know, I know there's some of y'all that rock with me, a lot of y'all that don't just yet. But yeah, just doing this podcast has always been like one of my favorite pastimes, just outside of my normal daily life, you know. And you know, connecting with people on Instagram and just like, you know, talking about different things in horror, you know, just talking to great people, you know, shout out to all y'all out there, and just having some of y'all that listen to me, like, you know, on a weekly basis. You know, I gotta give a big shout out to y'all out there. So yeah, you know, shout out to all the Team Doom lovers out there. Thank you for listening. thank you for coming to the show. And yeah, continue coming to the show because I am still cranking out these episodes. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I did have a certain goal in mind of how many episodes I wanted to do with the podcast and probably call it maybe a little bit of quits. But, you know, at the same time, I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens when I get to that goal because ain't like I'm like sitting here trying to pop off or anything. You know, I'm just trying to like have fun with this shit, you know, like honestly. But I mean, if y'all want to support me and, you know, fuck with me like that, yeah, definitely do what you can to support the Team Doom followers out there, you know. Because if y'all show me the love, I show love back. You know what I'm saying? Okay, that sounds almost like transactional, like prostitution. But, you know, y'all know what I get. Y'all know what I'm saying. But, you know, thank you, Team Doom. Y'all the real MVPs. Like I always said. You know, the reason why I do this podcast, you know, for some of y'all that are probably just like me, you know, you're probably like, you know, a kid out there, maybe a grown ass adult because I'm old as shit. And maybe like, you know, a lot of people tell you like, well, horror movies are not that good. Why are you liking horror movies? They're so disgusting. They're dumb and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, motherfucking Halloween come around. I bet you're the first person they think of whenever Halloween comes around and they want to watch a bunch of horror movies for that day. You know what I'm saying? like, miss me with that bullshit, you know? But, yeah, you're probably somebody that like feels like they're a bit of a weirdo for liking horror movies. But I'm going to say this. I was a weirdo kid too that loved horror movies. And, you know, for me, I just felt like I didn't understand my true love for horror until I was an adult, honestly. But as a kid, I had a fixation with horror movies, whether I knew it or not, you know. And I did my own thing, you know, where I was writing like a couple of horror stories and what have you. And I mean, I gotta say, like, it didn't really pan out as well for me because a lot of people didn't like what I was saying. Yeah, it was something that just really I got a lot of flack and hate for, and very stigmatized too, I want to say. So, yeah, if you're ever somebody that's out there, a kid that loves horror movies, you know, don't feel stigmatized because it's only a love for horror movies. You're not out there actually going out there doing some Columbine shit or whatever. And you know, and I feel like that's always the biggest stigma about people who love horror movies or people who love true crime documentaries or just follow like serial killers in general. I feel like we're always being stigmatized for liking that stuff. But it's like, how are we being stigmatized and being seen as a quote unquote threat? And I honestly felt like that's what some people actually felt when I was a kid, was like I was being threatening, but it was like, no, I'm not. Actually, the older I got, I was just like, yo, I was writing a piece of horror. Like, that's all it was. But yeah, like, unless, and I'm gonna say this, and I'm not gonna say like just because you're a person that looks at true crime doesn't mean you're not out there thinking about doing some true crime shit. You know, because there's levels to this shit. Obviously, there's levels to this shit. You know, there's a difference between people who want to research Ted Bundy and find out stories about Ted Bundy versus people who idolize Ted Bundy. Now, the motherfuckers that idolize Ted Bundy, that's a whole different breed. You know, and for me, I can't really consider them horror fans, you know, because at the end of the day, if they're sitting there idolizing Ted Bundy and talking about I aspire to be like Ted Bundy, that motherfucker you might want to get away from, or probably like put him on a list or something. But anyway, as you guys probably know, today's episode, we're going to be focusing on Ted Bundy today because there is a new Ted Bundy that is featuring Chad Michael Murray from One Tree Hill. Yeah, I really don't remember that One Tree Hill opening, honestly, because all I could think of is Dawson's Creek, which is what Chad Michael Murray was on originally. I believe he was on Dawson's Creek, so all I'm thinking about is I don't want to wait for my life to be over. If y'all remember that song. So yeah, just a little imitation of that song. And then another theme song that came to mind to me is the OC's if y'all remember that show with I believe Rachel Bilson, she was on that show. Yeah, it was like they had Rooney's California song, so it was like California, California, here we come. Yeah, and that was probably like their only best song. So yeah, we're gonna get into that today, you guys. But before we get into it, if you guys want to support your boy, be part of the Team Doom bandwagon nation and what have you, those social medias are Walterdoom on Instagram, Walterdoom1 on Twitter, or I think I changed it to The Walterdoom. I don't think I changed it to The Walterdoom yet, but it is The Walterdoom on TikTok, Walterdoom on everything that involves streaming, and yeah, like I said before, Walterdoom1 on Twitter. So yeah, if you guys want to check me out, definitely check out my social medias. Social medias will be in the descriptions of each episode like they always are. So yeah, if you guys did not catch that, yeah, definitely there are links that you can follow. There's also link trees in my Instagram and my Twitter that you can follow also, that will take you to those different platforms. Anyway, first things first, let's kind of handle some housekeeping for a bit, because I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys been wondering where the hell has Doom been. So last episode of the podcast, as just producer Doom just now reminded me of what last episode was. Yes, so last episode was with me and Megan's World, the lovely Megan's World, and we were talking about the Conjuring series. We were basically ranking the Conjuring series from worst to best, and we don't need to really go over like too much about what we said, but all I gotta say is, if you guys watched The Devil Made Me Do It, I want you guys to tell me how you felt about it, because for me personally, I still feel the same way that I do right now about it, is that it wasn't really that great of a movie, honestly. And like literally the first 30 minutes of the film was probably the best 30 minutes of the whole movie, honestly. But after I did that episode with Megan, I did take a bit of a break. If a lot of you guys don't really know, like this past month was my birthday, so a lot of those episodes that I was working on, and I actually had a lot of shows ideas that I was working on, but the thing is, I felt like a lot of things was just like a bit of a crunch, trying to get everything out, and I was trying to at least hopefully have a couple of episodes for you guys before actually going out on my vacation. I had an episode which was literally the last episode, and that was like literally probably the last episode I was able to really record and edit before actually leaving. I did have another episode in mind that was going to be episode 69, but it didn't end up happening as episode 69 because definitely other plans were made and what have you. So I went on vacation. I spent it, if you haven't like seen it on Instagram or anything, but I spent it with friends, spent it with my girl. We had a good time, and we made more of the vacation more about us than just like focusing on everything else. That's literally what the vacation should be about. I feel like if you're on vacation, it shouldn't have to be like this whole social media circus or just like this whole flex about like what you're doing. Me and her, we made a pact about like what would be appropriate behaviors and what have you. And that's one thing I gotta say, in this relationship that I'm currently in, I want to say it's very different. Okay, this is Walterdoom right now, being real talk right now. And probably if you guys want to skip ahead, you guys could skip ahead. But for everybody that's like out there that got like a relationship or is in a relationship or just started a relationship, here's some things that I've learned for myself that kind of worked for me. I've learned a lot from like my past relationships and just like what didn't work out. And I feel like that's something that we all need whenever we're in like those old types of relationships and what have you. What are you learning out of it? For me, I feel like there were some changes I need to make. Granted, and I'll admit there were some changes I need to make. We all need to make changes, It's never just a one person kind of thing. So, for me, I made a lot of changes within myself, before I was with her. And the way I met her is very much different from anyone else that I've met before. I mean, this is very much like a very funny story about how me and her actually met. But the one thing that me and her really came to terms about, which honestly, I feel like I never really had this kind of discussion in previous relationships, but it's definitely about communication. Me and her talked about how communication is important. And for her, she made it known like, yeah, I want you to communicate with me and let me know what's going on and let me know what's the deal. And for me, I just felt like, you know what? That's fair. That's a fair way to approach things. Because guys, as a man, and we could all kind of admit this, as a man, we all do lack a bit of communication. And we all kind of have like communication issues. So for me, that's something that that's something that I had to come in terms with. I should say not we, but more me than anything. So I'm going to speak for myself. That's something that I had to come in terms with as far as being in this relationship right now. When it got to this vacation, me and her agreed like, okay, what we're not going to do is we're not going to sit on our phones and post everything that we do, which is exactly what we did. Yeah, we do got like footage of like stuff that we did and everything. Like, there's a couple like things that we recorded, took pictures of, but I mean, that's expected, but it was more of so like, being on Instagram or TikTok or anything like that and just posting whatever content, maybe like, I don't know, we're at like Area 15, which is one of the places we went to, we're continuously posting shit on Instagram about being at Area 15, so we kind of agreed on, we did agree on just like not posting anything really to social media while we're out there. We agreed not to be on each other's stories, not to, scroll Instagram too much because it was more about us than anything else. And I feel like that's something that I don't want to say is rare, but for me, it was rare, but, cause I never had that really like that before, and honestly, maybe it's a bit of growing up, but again, I'm like 600 years old. So that's something that, that's just probably like a change within myself. But anyway, moving forward, after that, pretty much came back, tried to come back with a few episodes. And honestly, I gotta say like, it's not that I really wanted to take this hiatus, but it just had to happen because a lot of my real life situations or real life tasks or things just I had to do in real life, honestly, let's just say it like that, things I had to do in real life, I had to take care of. And we all get to that point of like, okay, well, you know what? I need to do this. I need to do that. As much as I would love to be here on this podcast every week, talking to you guys and just, giving you guys my thoughts about certain things, talk about certain news and what have you. At the same time, it's a job. It's definitely a job. I mean, I know there's people out there, they see like different creators, they come out, they talk about things sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes more on a daily basis. But to me, I feel like there's certain qualities to this shit besides just giving your own opinion half the time. Because when it comes to talking about like certain things, you want to give your opinion, but you want to also kind of like not give misinformation. But I don't know, maybe that's why some people are popping off, because what they do is give misinformation, But for me right now, it's like I do take my time with this podcast, because not only do I do this, I have my own day job that I'm at too. So between those two things, that takes time and energy, honestly, and also if I were still doing like 3 different podcasts, believe me, it will be a clusterfuck of things just to do, honestly. Like, all that stuff takes time, is what I'm trying to say. And I couldn't really balance everything out, so I had to kind of take a break for you guys. And, my apologies for being gone for so long, but you know what? We are back up in this bitch! All right. So that was way too much. But anyway, one more thing, as we go forward with the show again, because it is a bit of a task, and there's a lot of things that's going on in my real life that I am just trying to handle right now. I'm just trying to fix right now. And yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be a weekly episodes anymore. But more than likely I am probably going to be now doing this every other week. So yeah, expect your boy every other week. I know. So right now, besides all the sad news about what Walterdoom is doing, let's talk about today's episode. So like I mentioned before, we are going to talk about the Ted Bundy movie, which is called American Boogeyman. So that is going to be today's Thoughts of Doom.
Reality. Unseen by most. A place that is just as real, but not as brightly lit.
A dark side. Let's go. Yeah. Yeah. You guys hear this fucking beat? Sitting here yelling like DJ Khaled and shit, bruh. Oh, man. Why we let that beat ride out a bit, Welcome to Thoughts of Doom. Yo. So, as you guys know, Thoughts of Doom is usually just my moment where I give my own opinions about a certain story, movie that is coming out or is out or what have you. I just give you guys my opinion about it and how I feel like whether it's going to be something that we need or something we don't need. So the other day when I was on Blade Disgusting, I was cruising that for a little bit because I haven't been on there for like a very long time. I feel like lately for my episodes, I haven't really been needing to go to Blade Disgusting as much, but I should be going there to kind of see what's going on, but I haven't been going on there as much. I've been lacking, y'all, you know, because I just been so focused on, I don't know, I've just been so focused on trying to get like different show ideas, you know, talking to different people, having them as guests, and just like talking about things that they do for their love of horror. But as far as like being on Blade discussing, I haven't been on there so much, honestly, but usually I remember when I used to go on there a lot, it usually ended up being like the same stories over and over again, and that got boring to me after a while. But anyway, I go on there one day and I see like they have like this story about a new Ted Bundy movie that's supposed to come out. This new Ted Bundy movie is starring Chad Michael Murray, and I kind of feigned a little interest because I was like, Chad Michael Murray is in a Ted Bundy movie? Is he playing Ted Bundy himself? Which he is, honestly. Now, I don't know how many of y'all are actually fans of Chad Michael Murray or even One Tree Hill in general, if you ever grew up in that era where all those shows were kind of like the thing, you know, 90210 type spin-off shows. I mean, they actually literally brought back 90210. And I actually watched that one too when I was a kid. I mean, those are shows, I gotta admit. I mean, we as horror fans, we all have our guilty pleasures of shows and movies that we watch, you know, and probably like shows and movies that some of our other horror fan peers will probably look at us kind of with a side eye, like, is that what the fuck you're on? You know, but I mean, it's not all about eating the heads of bats and sacrificing children to Satan, you know? It's also sometimes seeing if Brooke is gonna get the guy, or seeing if Seth is gonna get the girl, even though he's a neurotic, crazy guy. And these are actually real characters off those shows, by the way, you know. Actually, one person we could really say that is part of the horror family is not just like Chad Michael Murray, but also Jessica Lowndes, who was on One Tree Hill, I believe. Or was it 90210? No, it was 90210. Yeah, I'm confusing my shows right now. But Jessica Lowndes, she was in 90210, and she was on a couple of horror movies. Oh my god, she was on this Darren Lynn Bousman musical movie. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me right now. And for some reason, I want to say Psycho Circus, but I know it's not Psycho Circus. Okay, so I found the movie that she was in. She was in the movie The Devil's Carnival, and it was a movie that was produced by and directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, and it was a musical. It was about like these characters that ended up going to hell, but they didn't know they were in hell because they were in incidents that ended up killing them. So they didn't know they were dead. So in this story, in this movie, Jessica Lowndes, I believe she plays like this character who was abused by her dad. And the problem with her is that she just keeps believing in whatever someone who is fucked up says to her. So there's this song that's at the end of the movie that I do like, that's with her and the devil. And it's a pretty dope song, honestly. It's like kind of like this little seaside song and what have you. Kind of like a reminiscent of like some type of Pirates in the Caribbean type shit, but more dark and shit, because she ends up giving her life to the devil and what have you. And it's like, yo, do you not realize you're in hell? But yeah, it's a very good movie to watch. If you ever see The Devil's Carnival, I believe it was on Amazon Prime. Hopefully it's still primed out for you guys to watch. But definitely, if you guys haven't checked that movie out, check it out. But moving forward, beyond all that, so there's a new movie That is out. It's in limited theaters, by the way. It's nothing that's really big or like spectacular, because I believe this movie is only going to be like in like 2 theaters. I mean, honestly, let's be honest right now. Whenever you hear something about like a movie is limited or it's like in limited releases, we all know like it's just in 2 theaters in each state, honestly. So yeah, there's this new Ted Bundy movie starring Chad Michael Murray, and Chad Michael Murray is playing Ted Bundy himself. So this background of the story is it's set in the 1970s, and this is supposed to be like the story of the manhunt of Bundy. So the movie is also starring Holland Roden, who was also in Escape Room Tournament of Champions. Now, I don't know how many of you guys actually watched that movie. I haven't watched that movie just yet. I still need to get around to wanting to be in the theaters, honestly. Right now, the new Candyman movie is out, and I just do not know whether I want to go see it or not. I mean, I might end up going anyway because right now everybody is talking about it on Instagram, and I am kind of like getting a little envious. You motherfuckers on Instagram, you're the reason why Doom might catch COVID from going to the theaters because I'm having FOMO right now. I haven't seen Escape Room, but it is starring this girl that's in this film. It is also starring Jake Hayes, who plays Robert Ressler, who is the guy who coined the phrase serial killer. This movie is also starring Lynn Shay, which is like, wow, how did they manage to pull Lynn Shay to be part of this film? But Lynn Shay is starring as Ted Bundy's mother, so this should be very interesting to watch and see her in. By the way, this movie is going to be hitting VOD in September 3rd, so hopefully this movie is not too expensive, because if it's costing anywhere over $5, yeah, your boy ain't getting it. I'll just wait till it hits like Shudder or something. The thing that kind of like fascinates me, or like was a bit of an intrigue, or kind of like a side eye, I should say, for me, is that this movie is directed and written by Daniel Ferrens. Now, if you guys don't know who Daniel Ferrens is, he is the guy who produced and wrote the movie The Haunting of fucking Sharon Tate. Oh my God. And we know how I feel about The Haunting of Sharon Tate. Now, for a lot of you guys who probably haven't listened to me at all, I'm going to give you a backstory. So it is, I want to say, what year was this movie? 2019, I believe. I want to say 2019. It's either 2019 or 2020. I'm not about to look this shit up. But it's either 2019 or 2020. Now, actually, I think it's 2019 because I believe this is when all 3 of those movies were coming out, which was Charlie Says, Haunting of Sharon Tate, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Okay, so I'm going ahead of the story. So imagine it's 2019. Pre-COVID era, pre-COVID. So there's like 3 Shannon Tate, there's 3 Charlie Manson movies coming out. The 3 that I just mentioned. The Haunting of Sharon Tate, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Charlie Says. I'm intrigued to see all 3 of them, because I'm like, okay, why are we getting 3 Charlie Manson movies? And I've talked about this on the podcast too. I said, why are we getting 3 Charlie Manson movies? This is ridiculous. So I'm pretty much confused on why they're doing this. I mean, I don't know if Hollywood keeps up with each other. All the companies are like, well, I'm doing a Sharon Tate movie. I'm doing a Charlie Manson. I mean, in a way, they're all different in a way. I haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've seen Sharon Tate, and I've seen Charlie Says. So far out of the 3, I do like Charlie Says, which I've recently watched. It's on Netflix. It's also on AMC Plus if you have that. It's a IFC film, so it's definitely worth watching. I mean, if you, I am somebody that's into IFC films. I do like that. I do like what they do with their films. They're kind of like A24 in a way, because they do make a lot of artsy films in a way. But that's beside the point. So it's 2019, and I believe I seen this movie probably in 2020, or maybe I seen it that year, because I remember I did talk about this movie. Yeah, actually it was 2019 when I seen this movie, because I remember I did talk about it as being one of the worst films that I've watched that year. So, yeah, and I had a whole like worst to best list of 2019. I might be doing one for 2021, but I might not, because there's just so many films that are out there and I haven't watched a lot of them yet. But we'll be getting there soon. But watching this movie was terrible. And I'm going to say this, and this is just to gloss over it a bit, because we're not going to stay on this too long, but The Haunting of Sharon Tate was just an absolute terrible film. And I'm going to say, and it's the same reason why I said it was bad. And the reason why it was bad, and I recently watched it again, is because the story, it's a story that wants to make you believe, what if Sharon Tate listens to her premonition about Charlie Manson, and her friends actually fought back against her attackers. As nice as it sounds on paper, it doesn't play out well as a film, honestly. You know, and it's so much of like, you know, you gotta force things to happen because we already know what happened in real life. And that's the thing, like, this film tries to play so much on reality and then trying to fictionalize some things. It became just like a jumble of, well, I don't know how to really take this film. How do I enjoy this film? How am I supposed to watch this film? I'm confused on how to watch it. Because it's like, okay, we got Tarantino, right? And we know Tarantino fictionalizes and completely absurds a lot of like history or historical moments or historical stories. Being one of Inglourious Basterds, which kind of like talks about the Nazi party and everything, and just like fictionalizes the whole Hitler and the Nazis and just Americans defeating Hitler, which we all know Hitler actually committed suicide. He didn't get killed by us or anybody else. But yeah, we know like he goes into complete absurdity and he stays within his absurdity. Like he goes balls deep within the absurdity, which is why Tarantino films are good. They're absurd. They're hyper violent, but they also are well written because he doesn't just put a toe in the water. He sticks his whole feet and balls in that water. So it's like with this film, The Haunting of Sharon Tate, Daniel Farris didn't literally stick his balls in the water. I mean, he just put a little sack in there. He dipped his sack. Like he literally dipped his sack in the water and was like, you know what? Maybe we should stay with the real life situation. Now, if they kind of like Inglourious Bastard up the whole, and I'm pretty sure they did, you know, with like, if they kind of Tarantino up a bit of the situations, because I remember reading about this incident too. Sharon Tate wasn't even like really being haunted necessarily by the Manson family. You know, they just literally stopped by the house a few times. Mainly Charlie just stopped at the house, like maybe like a couple of times because he thought Dave Melcher still lived at that house. And what ended up happening is that at some point Manson got frustrated and he was just like, you know what, we need to kill everybody at that house because I know Melcher is there and he's hiding, so we need to flush him out and teach him a lesson. You know, and if he's not there, well, we just send him a message by killing those people. So that's pretty much it. Like, that's literally what Charlie Manson's whole thing was. this movie doesn't really like play too much into that area. They just make Charlie Manson a more haunting figure that's kind of like leaving tapes at the house. Somehow the family is passing by Sharon Tate and her friend Abigail, and they all of a sudden just get this weird cold feeling like, oh my God, these people are scary. But it's like, they're two girls walking down a trail. They're just looking at you. That's about it. They didn't do anything like, oh yeah, bitch, we're going to slit your throat or anything. Or, yeah, bitch, we're going to eat your guts or anything like that. But I don't know. This movie plays too much into the fact that it tries to make you think like, oh, they're not involved, but maybe they are, kind of thing. Again, it's too much balls dipping, too much ball dipping. Dip your whole balls in the water. It's a little cold, but dip your balls in there. But anyway, let's stop talking about balls for a second. But all in all, the story, I want to say, is just not good. The movie is not good. It's not one of my favorites to watch. I would say like this movie is fun to watch if you were like drunk, high, or what have you. But then I feel like even if you are drunk or high and you're watching this movie, I feel like you would complain about wasting your time afterwards. Because again, Hilary Duff's acting, and don't get me wrong, I love me some Hilary Duff. I mean, honestly, Hilary Duff is fine as fuck to me. But and I'm pretty sure a lot of us out there think Hilary Duff is hot as fuck also. We all did enjoy watching her on Lizzie McGuire. Some of us probably who were watching Gossip Girl. I never watched Gossip Girl, by the way. I've only heard about it. But when I heard Hilary Duff was kissing another girl on Gossip Girl, I was like, hey, sign me up for that scene because I want to see that shit. So yeah, I have no issue with Hilary Duff at all. Is Hilary Duff capable of playing a multi-dimensional role where she has to give layers of acting? Probably not. And Sharon Tate movie actually proved how much, not really much depth she has or range that I could just sit there and be like, you know what, Hilary Duff is a great actress. And I feel like that's a lot of things you could say about like some of the Disney stars, that they're really good doing Disney shit, honestly. At the end of the day, they just, they have a two-dimensional role, happy and sad. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know like at a certain point, like Disney stars want to branch out and want to do their own thing. But it's like sometimes you don't really have that much chops to it. Like, stick to what you know, get your bag for it. If you're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to act an ass, act a fool, and all that for Disney, by all means, do it. And do your fuck shit, in private closed doors, Like, I'm going to use another example, like Raven-Symoné. Like, Raven-Symoné is probably as old as I am. If not like a couple of years older. And for me, like, I cannot see Raven-Symoné doing like a super serious role. Maybe like if it's like a comedy movie and she has to be lightheartedly serious, but I can't see her in like a deep crazy role, like doing like a Charlize Theron in Monster, or a fucking, I don't know. I just can't see her do anything like something serious, like in that sort of sense, without thinking like, well, that's Raven-Symoné. All she does is goofy shit. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a knock towards them, and she's getting her bag from the Raven show that she has. So I'm not even hating on that. So that's just all I wanted to say about that Sharon Tate movie. So because of that movie, I do have a bit of skepticism of how good this Ted Bundy movie is going to be. But here's the thing. Daniel Farrance also was an associate producer and he screen wrote The Girl Next Door. And that film was an excellent film. It was a really good film. So to me, I'm just like, I'm kind of torn. Because you have The Girl Next Door, which kind of like exponentially gets worse for the character Ruth each time she's mentioned, or each time we get deeper and deeper into what's happening to her. And again, like, I feel like Daniel Ferrens, he likes to make movies about real life crime dramas and kind of like writes about them and makes stories out of them, because he also did like a O.J. Simpson movie that is, I believe, is on Showtime, I believe. But I feel like with The Girl Next Door, it was a better movie than the Sharon Tate movie, honestly. So I don't know. I really don't know. So that's just like my take on Daniel Ferrens. But let's go ahead and jump into talking about this Ted Bundy film. All right. So first thing first, I'm about to give you guys my thoughts about whether this Ted Bundy film is going to be good or not. What this is going to be based on right now is my thoughts towards this film, only based on the trailer, because I have not seen this movie at all. It's going to be based on the trailer and what I'm taking from the trailer, but I'm also comparing it to movies like Extremely Wicked, which is also another Ted Bundy film, and the Ted Bundy film from 2001. So my first thing about, like, when I heard about this movie is, how good is this movie really going to be? So based on the trailer alone, you know, you got Chad Michael Murray in there, and honestly, like, it's maybe like a small sample size, and already I could tell kind of like he's going to be somewhat of a cold Ted Bundy, like how Ted Bundy really needs to be portrayed. Now, if you ever seen the 2001 Ted Bundy movie, it's kind of like he's not really cold or calculated. He just seemed like your normal everyday person. And honestly, that's literally how Ted Bundy came across to a lot of people, especially females that he killed. He came off as a normal guy, but was kind of weird in a way because of the questions that he asked. Not to mention that sometimes he portrayed himself as a cop when he wasn't a cop at all. With this Chad Michael Murray movie as Bundy, we kind of get the feeling of him being kind of cold and manipulative. With this one scene where he's rolling up to this girl and he's like, "Hey, you need a ride?" But the way he says, "You need a ride," it's not like, "Hey, you need a ride?" It's like, "Hey, you need a ride?" Like, it's like cold and nonchalant, and it's like, ooh, it's like, bitch, you better not get in that car. You ain't gonna make it alive, you know? I do like the fact that with this film, it seems like already I'm taking in the fact that they're not gonna sit there and play with us like what Extremely Wicked did. You know, they're not making it seem like Bundy is supposedly innocent and he's being framed. In Extremely Wicked, and I feel like that's the one thing about Extremely Wicked that really annoyed me the most about that film. They tried to play us into thinking like, oh, hey, guess what? Ted Bundy might be innocent. And I get it. We're supposed to be in the perspective of Elizabeth Clover. But it's like, at the same time, we know who Bundy is. We know the crimes that he's done. And I feel like they tried to play this movie to where, like, we could think like this man was innocent and that we could sympathize with him. Here's where we're going back to like the whole idolization. You know, people who idolize Bundy, you know, might actually think like, well, I don't know. I really don't think that's not really a good correlation, honestly, is it? Like people thinking like he might be innocent. Because if you're sitting there idolizing him, you're not idolizing him and saying he's innocent at the same time. That just doesn't breathe the same air. But with this movie, it tries to breathe that same air. It tries to breathe the air of he did it, but hey, nah, he might be actually innocent until we get to the end of the movie where he just semi confesses, which in real life, he never really confessed to her. He never really told her like he actually did it. He actually kept that a secret for a very long time, and she had to find out through the media, and she basically found out like everyone else. And she had to think to herself like, yo, this man was alone with my daughter and he killed a 14-year-old girl. He assaulted and killed a 14-year-old girl. You know, it's fucking crazy. But yeah, so like I feel like with Shockingly Evil or Extremely Wicked, you know, they tried to play Zac Efron's character a bit more on the attractive side. You know, like they didn't really try to make us feel angry. They didn't want us to hate Zac Efron is what I'm trying to say. They didn't try to make us hate Zac Efron in any type of way in that film. They wanted us to make it seem like he was innocent. They wanted to make it more about like Elizabeth, but it's like, to me, we already know who Bundy is. You can't fool us. Another thing that's interesting about this Bundy movie that's out right now is that they're kind of displaying the murders. So based on the trailer, once again, we're actually seeing Bundy commit those murders and those crimes that he did against women. The only Bundy movie that I know that they did that was the 2001 Bundy movie. And with that movie, it was definitely it was silly because it was a low budget film. But at the same time, it was very graphic because you actually see him do the sexual assault on these women. So for me, it's like to actually see that they're actually going to have kind of like the murders play out in front of you in the movie. I'm actually kind of interested and intrigued to see how they use it, you know. I want to see how like they're going to use these, well, how they're going to display these murders, you know. Is it going to be graphic? Is it going to be more focused on Murray himself, where you don't really get to see like any blood or guts or anything like that? I don't know. I'm just intrigued on knowing how they're going to display this type of activity on the film. On Extremely Wicked, I mean, I thought they were going to do that with Zac Efron's character, but once again, I feel like with Zac Efron, they did not want to make him seem hated, or they didn't want the audience to hate Zac Efron, or maybe there was something in Zac Efron's contract where he was just like, you know what, I don't want anybody to hate my character, you know, I want people to love me because I'm used to that, you know, I'm the guy from High School Musical and what have you. So I don't know, I really couldn't tell you whether like in his contract like he was just like, yeah, I don't want anybody to hate me at all, but it definitely seemed like he did not want that character to get hated on. They didn't want that character to experience any flack from people at all, or just negative thoughts about the character. You know, they didn't even really display the murders. And I gotta say, when they displayed the murders, which came up at the end, I was really disappointed, honestly, because I was hoping that they did show like Zac Efron being full Bundy throughout the film, but they didn't. You know, they only did partial, which was at the end. So I was just like, yo, this was very disappointing. So I can't believe like they have us watching an hour and 30 minutes of this film just to be disappointed. And honestly, I guess for us that are actually watching it for like blood and guts and shit like that, you know, this movie is definitely disappointing. The Extremely Wicked one, I have to say. Now, the Chad Michael Murray one, American Boogeyman, we might not be that disappointed, honestly. And I'm trying to hope that I don't end up disappointed. Honestly, the thing that came to mind also because of like how Zac Efron was being used in the film, I was thinking like, well, how much of Bundy are we going to see in American Boogeyman? Because I'm hoping that they're not doing the same thing with American Boogeyman like they did with Extremely Wicked. Because this movie is following like the 2 FBI agents that are chasing Bundy. You know, this is not strictly a Bundy movie. I mean, we had a Bundy movie that was strictly Bundy, but this is more focused on the manhunt. But the thing is that I hope that they use this movie as more like Zodiac. If you guys ever seen the movie Zodiac before with Jake Gyllenhaal and Iron Man. Oh my god. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name right now, but Robert Downey Jr., you know, that was a really good film. If you guys haven't seen Zodiac before, definitely check Zodiac out. I believe the last place I remember seeing it was on Tubi, but I don't know if it's still there or not, but definitely check it out. But yeah, the one thing I could say about that movie Zodiac, it had a balance of just what they were doing in the film of like seeing the killer commit his crimes, which also starred another One Tree Hill alum, which is Lee Norris, who played Mouth. And he played in the Zodiac movie a young, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was the young version of that guy. He was one of the first victims who was killed on the Lover's Lane Trail. So, but he wasn't killed. He actually survived the whole Zodiac killing. Yeah, definitely check that movie out because like in that film, they do display the murders of the victims in that movie, but they also have a good balance of like the mystery aspect of the characters in the film, Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey, trying to figure out who is the Zodiac killer, and you get that drama within it too. And I believe that movie is like a little bit about 2 hours or a little over 2 hours, but either way, because of how well paced this movie was, it's a really good film because it didn't feel like it was rushed, or it didn't feel like it had to rush a lot of things. So yeah, I'm hoping that American Boogeyman kind of takes that same approach versus the romantic movie that we got from Extremely Wicked, because it was shit. Honestly, it was definitely shit. Like, none of us really care about that whole lovers bullshit, blah blah blah, what have you. I did not care about like all of that shit. Yeah, we do kind of like care about to see like how Bundy escaped. Like, honestly, like this stuff about him escaping, him lying to her. Some of it was very interesting, but at a certain point, you know, there was still the fact that we didn't see much of the killings that he's done, and we were still like being displayed like this character who the movie is trying to convince us is innocent, you know, and we already know the story about him. I mean, eventually he did confess his murders, and he confessed that he might have done like hundreds of them, by the way, you know, and this is like during a time before like, you know, security is what it is today, you know, no privacy and shit like that, you know. But I don't know. I feel like today there couldn't be another Bundy, honestly. There could be somebody that does mass murders, which honestly is what we really get nowadays, is like people who do more mass murders than, you know, serial killing and all that. But I feel like even though there are still serial killers out there, because there are, and I watched like a small documentary about that, or a docu-series about serial killers that are out in like the contemporary times today. I feel like there won't be another serial killer in the magnitude of Bundy or Ramirez, because just the way security is now today, you know, things is governed a little bit differently. So, but that's just my thoughts about that. At the end of the day, I'm just thinking, like, do we really need another Ted Bundy film? And honestly speaking, we really don't. We really don't need another Ted Bundy film. But if they could present to us, and I'm going to say yes on this extent, if they could present something different to us that makes the Ted Bundy films a little bit more interesting, or like we're getting like a different side of the story, which we are getting a story about like behind the scenes of this manhunt. But is this a story that we really want to see? Not really. At least for me, not really. I don't want to see this. But again, if it's free, I will definitely check it out. And like I mentioned before, if it's like over $5 on video on demand, yeah, I won't be seeing this movie. Oh man, but you know what? There are some killers that I'm gonna talk about right now that I feel like should probably have their own film and kind of like their own movie, because again, like these killers are maybe not like quote unquote idols, and I don't want to call them idols because it seems like we're kind of like, I guess, martyrizing these killers, but they're not, you know. They are what they are. They're serial killers, and the crimes that they did are very heinous, and we should not be idolizing them at all, you know. And I feel like there is like this idolization of like Bundy or Gacy and what have you, you know. But if anything, I would like them to just be like what they are. Killers who are inspirations to tell fucked up stories. Honestly, that's all they are. It's inspiration for fucked up stories. But here are some killers, well, at least two killers, that I thought, you know, they have some kind of interesting stories in a way. And it's like their stories is probably just as fucked up as like a Ted Bundy or a John Wayne Gacy or Jeffrey Dahmer. So yeah, I'm about to tell you guys what killers we should talk about right when we come back. So like we shouldn't say in a scary movie, I'll be right back. All right, and we are back now, you guys. So before we went to break, I was talking about the Ted Bundy movie and how we really kind of don't really need another Ted Bundy movie, honestly. But I do want to like right now go over a couple of killers, serial killers that Hollywood should probably put more focus on, just to have like a new refresh idea of like serial killers, or just like new serial killer stories in general. So first one up that I want to talk about, and these are two different varying killers, honestly. You know, one is more of a violence for the sake of violence, honestly. I mean, a real fucked up person, by the way. But behind that story is dealing with a lot of like corruption behind the police force. And I feel like with this story, because of like the time that this killing was happening, it does make an intriguing story if you're getting like all sides of the angles, or if you're just focusing on more the police side of things too. So the first person I want to talk about that should be your focus is the Grim Sleeper. So the Grim Sleeper, if you guys don't know, the Grim Sleeper is Lonnie David Franklin Jr., and he was active during the times of the 1980s to 2000s. So the reason why I feel like they should make more stories about him, because most of the time they make stories about him through documentaries, you know. But we rarely had like a cinematic story of the Grim Sleeper himself. Now I feel like with this story, it could be a very grim story about a Los Angeles area where I grown up, of course, where like in the 1980s, a lot of like the drug and prostitution was really kind of running rampant in these areas. And we're talking about South Central Los Angeles. We're talking about a time before, you know, they wanted to gentrify the area and want to call it South LA. So this will be a very interesting story to kind of like touch bases on and kind of like put everything in that South Central area, have like all the hallmarks of like how South Central was not really the greatest place to live back in the days of the 80s and 90s, you know. So with the Grim Sleeper, what makes his story kind of interesting, again, it's not so much like we're idolizing what he does as a killing. Most of the killings that he has done was against women who were prostitutes and women that were drug addicts. And usually like with the women that he came in contact with, it was usually like a transaction of either or both. And that's how he usually killed them. His MO was literally sexually assaulting women and killing them and taking pictures of them. I feel like this will be a very gritty story to tell. Also, it talks about how like the LAPD, they weren't really that competent back during this time because they weren't really focused on this murder specifically. So the murders happened between 1984 to 1988. That's when he took a hiatus from killing. But during that time, the Grim Sleeper, the Night Stalker was running rampant around Los Angeles too in 1985. So there was this activist, her name was Margaret Prescott, and she was the leader of a group called the Black Coalition Fighting Against Serial Killers. And she was leading this cause because they had to protest against the LAPD and try and force their hands on increasing their rewards on knowing information about the Grim Sleeper, because at the time before the protests or the pressure that they put on LAPD, they were only charging they were only giving away like $10,000 for information. For Prescott, she felt like that's not enough. It needs to be more, because right now we have a serial killer that's killing black people on the streets, and that's literally who the Grim Sleeper's victims were black women who were on the streets that were prostitutes or, again, looking for drugs. So those were his victims. He took victims that more likely nobody really cared about. And that was literally the whole sad part about the whole thing. There was a survivor from that 80s period, Anitra Washington, I believe that's her name. And she did an interview with LA Weekly actually describing who this Grim Sleeper guy was, because she managed to escape from him. I believe she did this interview in like the early 2000s. So it wasn't anything that literally she told anybody like just right there and then. I mean, I'm pretty sure she told police about what the guy looked like, how he looked, and gave a description, because the police during the 1980s were more focused on catching a Night Stalker, because he stalked more upscale areas than like the black neighborhoods. That was literally the police's focus. They were focused on getting Richard Ramirez more than the Grim Sleeper. So there has been like varying task forces that really focus on getting this guy. I don't want to spend too much time on this. The way they caught this guy was basically from DNA evidence, and they got DNA evidence from arresting his son, because his son was involved. And this is like sheer irony, by the way. The son got arrested for weapons charge. They ran some DNA on him, found his DNA as a match for previous murders in the 1980s. But because of his age, he couldn't be the guy that killed those women. So instead, they focused on the father. So the way they got the father's DNA evidence, they set up like a sting operation at a restaurant that he go to, that he kind of frequent at. And my God, like, it's insane on how much DNA they got from him. So from like, they got DNA from like the plates he used, the utensils that he used, even like the pizza that he didn't even finish. Like, he literally ate the pizza and left the crust. And they pretty much took that little evidence and got his saliva off of it and used that as the DNA evidence to connect him to those murders. So like in 2000, I believe it was 2008 is when he was arrested. Yeah, like by then, I believe he came out of retirement because he committed another murder in 2002. So they're connecting like the Grim Sleeper to at least like 10 plus murders, but it could range from 10 to 25, I believe. But yeah, like the guy was literally, he took some time off. He took some time off. But the thing is, like, this was not only his crime. He used to be in the army too, and he got dishonorably discharged for him being in a gang assault with two other servicemen, brutally assaulted a 17-year-old girl. Now, the only reason why he got caught is because the girl pretended to feign interest in the guy. She went to his superiors and told them what had happened. The most that they gave was just a dishonorable discharge. Even though there was photos of him, that's all he really got. He didn't do no time or anything like that, but he did do time for other crimes. And I feel like this is a good story that Hollywood, I feel like, could really work with if they want to like examine a new serial killer in the realm of the Serial Killer Hall of Fame. And again, we're not glorifying any of these dudes because what they did was heinous. Now, my thing is, if they were to make a Grim Sleeper movie, it would be more of like a crime drama where like it's kind of like an American Gangster type movie, if you guys ever seen that movie. Or if you don't want to like focus on like the police and you just want to focus on the murderer himself and make it more of a horror movie, you could do something like what Maniac did or like the Ted Bundy movie did and just focus on the killer himself. The next killer in our examination that Hollywood literally could be focusing on, and this one is a different killer, by the way, because I feel like with this killer, you could do a different approach about this killer. This killer could be like a story, a true story, kind of like the movie Joker in a way. And this is more focusing on Christopher Dorner. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Christopher Dorner before, but this is another guy in LA who went on a mass shooting spree, but he mass murdered cops. So the story about Christopher Dorner is he's an ex-Navy soldier. Well, not really ex-Navy soldier, but you know, when he joined the police force, he was still in the Navy and he was a lieutenant there. He joined the police force because that's what he wanted to do. And by the way, this guy is a very athletic and educated guy, by the way. Like, the guy went to Southern Utah and graduated with political science and a minor in psychology. So the guy is no dummy, but the thing that Dorner has dealt with most of his life, which like most of the black experience is, if you're like the only black person in a predominantly white neighborhood, is he experienced a lot of racism. Now, me being from LA, I don't know what it's like to experience that type of stress, but I do know people who grew up in small towns where they were literally like the only black person in their schools. So I'm sure there was a lot of microaggressions going on and just a lot of like racist behavior that is just unfathomable, you know, and just unspeakable. with Dorner during his time in the police force, because he joined LAPD for a little bit, I should say, before he was terminated. And he was terminated because of this, because of his partner, Teresa Evans, who was his trainee. She was in a situation during a disturbance call. There was a guy named Christopher Gettler. He suffered from schizophrenia with some severe dementia. And what happened during this altercation is that Evans ended up brutally assaulting the victim, or the suspect, I should say. I mean, whichever one you want to go with, because he did get a disturbance called on him. But this is a guy with mental health issues. And by the way, I gotta say, because this story happened around 2000, in the mid 2000s. So this is 2004, 2005 area. And because of like all our knowledge now about mental health, I feel like some of this shit just won't fly anymore, which I feel like that's a good thing. I do like the fact that now, like, mental health is just no longer this mystical thing that is just seen as like this terrible boogeyman or this boogie whatever, and you get stigmatized in a negative aspect. Yeah, there's still some like mental health problems where like, or people with mental health that do get stigmatized for their mental health. In this situation back with Dorner, he saw Evans pretty much brutally assaulting the man, and he made a complaint towards LAPD. What ended up happening is that the case went to the board. The board sided with Evans over Dorner, and because they said Dorner lied about the incident, even though Gettler took the stand, they took Gettler's responsive as incohesive and non-responsive, or it was incoherent and unresponsive. So they didn't really like side with Dorner at all, and they cited that he lied, which literally got him terminated from the force. And honestly, I feel like this was probably the thing that threw him on the brink of murder, because it was like his name was being trashed. And I want you all to think about this. Think about, like, all your life you're going through different schools, predominantly white areas. You are pretty much being like looked at in the most negative light as possible, no matter where you go. And you're dealing with this 5 to 7 years of school. And then even in college, you're probably dealing with some microaggressions and dealing with like people with racist ideologies about you. And then you go to the police force and you have to deal with more of that shit. So at a certain point, it's like the Joker movie. It's like, how much can you take before you start to crack? And that's literally what happened to this guy, is that he started to crack. What happens after all of this happens is that Dorner goes on a killing spree, and he kills about, I want to say, 4 victims so far from what I've read. But during this time, and I remember when this was happening, I was a kid when this happened, by the way. I was like probably like early on in college and what have you, because this is like 2005, so I was in college when this was happening. I remember when this story first came out and he was murdering everybody. At first, I didn't think he was black. Honestly, let's be honest, because this was a mass murder. This was a serial killing. Serial killers get usually associated with white people. Let's just like put that out there. Like, it usually gets associated with white people. But let's keep this in mind. Serial killers is not a white thing. And it could be any color. Serial killing doesn't have a race. It doesn't have a race at all. As we learned from like our past serial killer, the Grim Sleeper, black guy killed a lot of people in South Los Angeles. Richard Ramirez, Hispanic guy, killed a lot of people in different areas of LA to like fucking, I want to say San Francisco also. But yeah, different killer, a killer of different race. But when I found out who the killer was, which was Christopher Dorner, I was like, oh shit, another one. That was literally, I kid you not, that was literally my reaction at first when I found out that Dorner was the killer. But then when I was hearing more about his story, it was like, oh, okay, understandable, but at the same time, not acceptable. With Dorner, he killed a lot of people, injured a few people also, and mainly it was officers, honestly. But what made this story crazy is that there was also fault on the LAPD too. So what ended up happening when the police was on a manhunt for this guy, keep this in mind, they were looking for a gray 2005 Nissan Titan. These fools, the LAPD, I'm calling fools, shot up a pickup truck that was a light blue Toyota Tacoma. In that Toyota Tacoma was 71-year-old Emma Hernandez and her daughter, 47-year-old Margie Carranza. So, and what they were doing was they were delivering papers. They were delivering newspapers. Like, can you imagine? There's this guy that's on the loose. Police is looking for him and everything. You're doing your job in the morning. You're delivering papers. You probably already like, fuck this job. Why am I up in this job this early in the morning? I'm tired of doing this shit. I wish I could just quit this job. Whatever. Next thing you know, your car gets cornered and shot at. And by the way, there was 102 bullets that was put in this car, by the way. They mistaken your light blue car for a gray truck. That's not even the same make. Not even the same make. Or the same color at that. But see, that's the story I heard. That's the one story I heard. But there were two more stories, and I believe I heard this story too when I was young too. But there were two more stories that happened after that. So this just not only happened once. This happened twice. Second one was a black Honda Ridgeline. That's not great, is it? Why did they do that? So they ended up shooting that vehicle also. I don't know what happened to the guy, but I believe he still lived. There was another truck driven by David Perdue who drove a vehicle that's not the same make or color of the vehicle as Dorner's. They literally slammed into his car and then shot at him. When I heard about these stories, and it's funny because in the news reports, like when the police were like on the news, the chief of police, I believe it was either Braden or Beck. I can't remember which one was like the police chief at the time, but they were on the news talking about like, yeah, we just want to talk to Dorner, like, turn yourself in, bring yourself to justice, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But what they were doing was completely different. These motherfuckers was out here literally trying to kill the man. And we knew they were trying to kill the man on sight. So what made this story even more interesting is I'm pretty sure Dorner was watching the news too, and he was hearing about these incidents because this is what happened afterwards. Dorner set his car on fire. He set his car on fire so that way they don't even trail him or know what car he's in. And he set his car on fire in Big Bear, which is where the truck was found. So with Dorner like setting his car on fire, police was like, shit, we don't even know where this guy is at now. But the crazy thing is like where he set his car on fire, he wasn't far from that area. So it's like you're on foot now. Anybody knows where you're at now. So he pretty much was in a cabin in Big Bear, had a standoff with police, ended up getting killed. Apparently, based on autopsy, they said that he shot himself in the head. I don't know how true that was because his body was found charred up and on fire afterwards, when everything was all said and done. Me, I have questions. I'm just like, I don't know how factual this was with him actually killing himself, but if they said he killed himself, hey, that's what they're claiming. I can't prove otherwise. But what makes this like a story to kind of tell? Again, it's like almost like a story like Joker in a way. I mean, if you guys ever seen Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, it's a dark, gritty story. And I didn't like it at first, honestly. But the more I started watching it more and more, I begin to like it. I am beginning to like the film for what it is. And just like Joker, Christopher Dorner's story is no different. It's a guy that's literally being dragged through the mud and being pushed to the brink of murder. I mean, no one's telling him to commit murder, but it's like when you're being pushed so much and it's like you don't have that help and support system to kind of tell you like, yo, don't do it. And not to mention like this guy was also divorced too. So it's just like it's adding flames to his aggression, And honestly, the guy probably needed a lot of help as far as like psychological wise, just to deal with like some past trauma that he's dealt with as a kid. Because dealing with racism, I mean, that's trauma. That's honestly trauma right there, And it's like it creates that whole mistrust of like anybody that's outside of your race and what have you. And it's like no one could really tell this guy what he did was wrong because it's like no one else was really in his shoes like that. But what this guy endured was really some fucked up shit, Allegedly, if it's true or not, whether like, everything that's happened is what it is. But yeah, those are some killers that I feel like Hollywood should start off with. I mean, those are like killers I feel like, we don't hear enough about and just hear how fucked up their crimes are. As much as we're all into like hearing different true crimes and seeing documentaries, I feel like with the Grim Sleeper, we see more documentaries and stories, but we have not really seen like an actual movie. And I really do want to see what a movie about him would look like. Not to say like we're trying to glorify him again, but it is a story to kind of like talk about like what happened during that time. And same thing with Christopher Dorner. It's more about like the racism and the corruption of the police force and how like, like with police, if you don't stick up for one person, you're pretty much like seen as an outcast after that. So those are my killers that they could really be focusing on in Hollywood. So Hollywood, please, let's make that happen, But anyway, we're about to go ahead and jump into the outro. Alright guys, we are at the outro right now, and as you guys know, I usually have a slasher corner movie of the week to watch. The movie that I want to say you guys should check out, definitely check out The Boy Behind the Door. It's an interesting movie. It's on Shudder. If you guys have Shudder, check it out. It's about two boys that get kidnapped, and it's literally about one boy trying to save his friend from these people who are just kidnappers, honestly. But the more we go into that story, the more crazy you find out the motives about these killers and what they have done to like other victims. It's a hell of a movie to watch. It's filmed really good. It's very gritty. It can be a bit triggering for somebody, well, for some people who either probably been in that incident before or have had a child in that situation before or dealt with, or if you're just even sensitive to that topic in general. You know, it's definitely like very triggering. And if you want to check that out, definitely check it out. Other than that, your boy is about to sign out for the day. Again, those social medias is Walterdoom on Instagram, Walterdoom1 on Twitter, Walterdoom on everything else that involves streaming, and the Walterdoom on TikTok. So once again, I want to thank you guys, the audience, for taking your time listening to your boy. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for just rocking with your boy for a while. And until next time, this has been another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. Oh, I gotta shout out my niggas though. I gotta shout out Callie the Wolf and Algorythm-C for providing the music. You guys are definitely my dudes. You guys are definitely, the ones that always help the show and what have you. Definitely check out Algorythm-C's new album. It is on Bandcamp. So yeah, and other than that, this has been another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Oh, and by the way, the Algorithm-C album is called Complexity. So yeah, definitely check that shit out. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Peace. Stay diabolical, people. And I'll see you next time.